The void of space was eerily quiet, as though the universe itself held its breath. Across the barren reaches of the Torvian expanse, the enemy armada hung in a formation like a swarm of metallic locusts, engines glowing a sickly crimson hue. Thousands of warships, fighters, and dreadnoughts floated with an air of dominance, the culmination of a century-long reign of terror by the Jarnak Collective. Captain Thrin of the Jarnak flagship Voxcar stood tall in the observation chamber. A predator's grin stretched across his reptilian face. The battle, no, the extermination, would soon begin. The final human outpost in this sector had sent out a pitiful distress signal, one the Jarnak fleet would soon silence for good. Humanity had fought hard, yes, but they were fractured, disorganized, and weaker than the collective. Their days were numbered. "Lord Thrin," hissed a Jarnak subcommander, bowing low. "Sensors report no further resistance. The humans have abandoned their defenses. The fleet shall proceed on your command." Thrin's smile faltered for just a moment. His slit-like eyes narrowed. Alandon, he paused, glancing at the holographic display of the sector. Where were the human warships? Why did they not cling desperately to their last stronghold? Something didn't feel right, and instincts honed over decades of conquest prickled at the back of his mind. He turned sharply to his science officer. "Scan the system again. I want a full sweep. If the humans have fled, we will confirm it. I will not allow our victory to be tainted by incompetence." The officer, a smaller Jarnak with mottled green scales, nodded and moved to the scanning controls. The room fell into silence, save for the faint hum of energy conduits powering the ship's systems. Thrin's yellow eyes remained locked on the holographic map, its three-dimensional render glowing with soft red light. He watched the system's planets drift lazily in their orbits, lifeless and insignificant. "We detected a transmission earlier, yes?" Thrin demanded suddenly, breaking the silence. "What of it?" "It was weak, my lord," the communications officer replied quickly, head bowed. "A simple distress beacon. It was likely automated. The humans often abandon such systems as a feeble plea for help." Thrin's tail twitched. He was not convinced. The humans had proven themselves cunning before. Their defeat was inevitable, but they were resilient, dangerously so. He had seen colonies reduced to ash, yet somehow survivors always managed to slip away, scattering like rats into the galaxy's dark corners. It was an annoyance, a blemish on the glory of the Jarnak war machine. "My lord," the science officer's voice cut through Thrin's thoughts. "I have something." Thrin's head snapped toward the officer, his gaze piercing. "Report." The officer hesitated, as though unsure how to explain what the sensors had found. There is something strange, a signature, faint but distinct, a mass displacement at the system's edge." Thrin's brow furrowed. "Explain yourself." It is as if something large moved through this sector very recently. The displacement patterns suggest a fleet entering or exiting hyperspace, but the energy readings are abnormal, too clean, too precise. Hyperspace jumps leave chaotic signatures, yet this is unlike any we've recorded before. A ripple of unease passed through the bridge crew. Thrin felt it too, though he crushed it beneath his iron will. Human technology is crude. They are not capable of precision. Are you suggesting otherwise? "No, my lord, I am only reporting what the sensors show." The officer swallowed, his throat bobbing nervously. "And there is more. A residual signal buried deep in the radiation field. It appears to match human frequencies, but it is stronger, encrypted, far more advanced than what we have encountered before." "Impossible," Thrin growled. "They are scavengers, scum. They could never achieve such advancements. But even as he said it, doubt wormed its way into his mind. What if humanity had been hiding something? What if their desperate, fractured appearance was merely a facade? Thrin slammed his fist against the control panel, sending a shockwave of energy through the room. The bridge fell deathly silent. Increase scanning resolution. I want answers, and I want them now. The science officer worked feverishly at his station, his fingers dancing over the glowing controls. On the main screen, the system's map expanded, zooming outward until the entire Torvian expanse was displayed in detail. The faint anomaly flickered on the edge of the system, a ghostly ripple in the fabric of space. "There!" the officer exclaimed, pointing. "The anomaly is stabilizing. Something is emerging." All eyes turned to the viewport as the first ripples appeared in the void. At first, it was subtle, an odd distortion, like heat haze shimmering across an invisible barrier. But then the space itself began to warp, and with it came a deep, resonating hum. The sound reverberated through the hull of the Voxcar, rattling the bridge's fixtures and sending a chill through even the most hardened officers. "Hyperspace signatures detected," the officer cried. "My lord, it's a fleet!" "A human fleet," Thrin demanded, though his voice held none of its usual confidence. The distortion erupted with a blinding flash of light. From the rift in space, they came. First, the shadows emerged, massive silhouettes backlit by the residual energy of hyperspace. Then the lights ignited, rows of brilliant white and blue glowing from engines, hull plating, and weapons systems. Human warships poured into real space, sleek and terrifyingly symmetrical, their formation as precise as a machine. Frigates and destroyers darted like daggers alongside monstrous dreadnoughts, their armored hulls bristling with cannons and missile bays. They moved as one, a wave of steel and fire that dwarfed anything Thrin had ever seen. "By the void," whispered one of the bridge officers. The lead ship emerged from the haze, a colossal vessel that dwarfed even the Voxcar. Its hull bore the insignia of humanity, a gleaming blue earth flanked by a pair of wings. Its forward prow bristled with weaponry, and energy coursed along the ship's spine, pulsing like the heartbeat of a god. "Identify that ship!" Thrin shouted, though his voice cracked with panic. The officer's hands trembled as he read the data. "It is the HSS Vindicator, my lord, a human dreadnought-class vessel, but its specifications, they exceed anything in our records." The Vindicator. Thrin's claws dug into the control panel as he stared at the behemoth. Humanity had sent a flagship to meet them. No, not just a flagship, an armada. How could they build this?" he whispered, disbelief shaking his voice. "LA." Suddenly the communications console flared to life. A voice echoed across the bridge, clear, confident, and undeniably human. "This is Admiral Sora Valen of the United Earth Fleet. Jarnak Collective Forces, you are trespassing in our space. This is your only warning. Withdraw immediately or face annihilation." Her words sent a ripple of shock through the Jarnak officers. Withdraw? From humans? It was absurd. The void of space remained quiet, but it was no longer the calm before the storm. On the bridge of the Voxcar, Captain Thrin paced like a caged predator. The massive holographic display in the center of the command deck flickered as new data poured in. It showed a fleet of human ships emerging from hyperspace. The first wave of what Thrin now realized was far more than a simple skirmish force. He could scarcely believe his eyes. "The Vindicator," he muttered under his breath, his voice low and venomous. How did they build such a monstrosity? The human dreadnought was the centerpiece of their fleet, But it wasn't alone. Flanking it were scores of destroyers, carriers, and frigates, each one boasting weaponry and shielding far beyond anything humanity had fielded in the past. Their formations were flawless, their precision unnatural. The humans had not simply come to defend their territory, they had come to crush their enemies. "My lord," the science officer stammered, his hands shaking as he brought up more sensor data. "These ships, they are unlike any human vessels we have encountered before. Their engines output 3 times the standard energy levels. Their weapon signatures are exotic. They match no known technology in our database." Trin's scales bristled as he rounded on the officer. "Explain. Have the humans somehow allied with another species?" "I don't think so, my lord," the officer replied nervously, eyes darting between screens. "The designs are undeniably human. The insignia on the hulls confirm it, but the power readings, it's as if they have advanced 100 years overnight." "Impossible," Trin hissed. His tail snapped against the floor in frustration. "Humanity has been on the verge of collapse for decades. They lack the unity, the resources." "I haven't stopped to consider," I said with a shrug. Trin scowled. His words trailed off as another distortion flared at the edge of the sector. A second wave of human ships emerged, dozens more, blinking into existence with the same unnatural precision. Dreadnoughts, battleships, and agile corvettes spread out, their engines glowing like miniature suns. The hum of their arrival reverberated through the Jarnak fleet, shaking hulls and rattling nerves. Ooze. Thunder cracks followed, and "There are more of them," said a subordinate, his voice nearly breaking. "Thousands more. They're surrounding us." "I can't find them. You see, I'm not trying to find people, I'm trying to find a fate." Trin turned toward the viewport, his yellow eyes narrowing as he stared at the advancing wall of human warships. For the first time in his long career, a chill crawled down his spine. Humanity was no longer running. They had returned, and they had brought with them something terrifyingly powerful. At the bridge of the HSCC Vindicator, Admiral Sora Valen stood with her hands clasped behind her back. The glow of the tactical holograms illuminated her face, and the hum of the ship's systems buzzed faintly in the background. Around her, the crew worked in perfect synchronization, their focus absolute. "Admiral," Lieutenant Reyes called from the sensor station, his voice steady. "The Jarnak fleet has detected us. Their formations are beginning to shift, but they seem hesitant." "They're scared," Sora replied without looking away from the main viewport. Beyond the thick glass, the Jarnak fleet stretched across the void like a crimson net, their engines flickering like dying embers. But even now, their dominance was faltering. "They should be scared," she continued. "For too long they've hunted us. For too long we have been prey. That ends today." Reyes swallowed, his throat dry. "Admiral, do you think they know what we found?" Sora turned to face him, her cybernetic eye glowing faintly as it processed the data streaming in. The corner of her mouth twitched into a knowing smile. "Finally." "No," she said, "not yet." The Vindicator's bridge fell into an uneasy silence as the implication hung in the air. The truth behind humanity's sudden resurgence was a closely guarded secret, one that had turned the tides of war in their favor. The discovery had been made only 6 months earlier, and its origins remained a mystery even to the brightest minds of Earth since the period before contact. The few people who had been privy to the secret spoke of it only with dismay. It had begun in the shattered remnants of the Kepler expanse, a sector that had been devastated by Jarnak assaults decades ago. The ruins of entire star systems littered the region, their planets reduced to barren rocks and their colonies long abandoned. It was a graveyard, a reminder of humanity's darkest days. But deep within the ruins, hidden in the orbit of a dead star, Humanity had found it, an ancient structure, massive beyond comprehension. It dwarfed even the largest human dreadnoughts, its surface shimmering with faint, glowing symbols. The structure, what scientists would later name the Ark, appeared to predate any known civilization. It was old, far older than the Jarnach Collective, or even humanity's oldest records, and yet it was alive. When humanity's explorers approached the Ark, the dormant structure had stirred. It reached out to them, scanning their ships, their systems, their very DNA. What it found, no one knew for certain, but the response had been clear. The Ark had activated, and with it, a treasure trove of technology and knowledge had been unlocked. In the months that followed, humanity worked tirelessly to integrate the Ark's technology into their fleet. The advancements were staggering. Energy shielding capable of withstanding direct hits from Jarnach cannons, weapons that could tear through enemy ships with surgical precision, and engines that made human vessels faster and more agile than ever before. But the most significant discovery was the core. At the heart of the Ark was a power source unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Scientists called it the Infinite Core, a sphere of pure energy that seemed to defy the laws of physics. It generated limitless power, enough to fuel an entire fleet for centuries. With the Infinite Core in their possession, humanity had done the impossible. They had turned the tide of the war. Sora's gaze hardened as she looked out at the Jarnach fleet. They had no idea what they were facing. The humans' secret weapon was not their ships, nor their numbers. It was the knowledge they had uncovered, the knowledge that had transformed them from prey into predators. "Admiral," Reyes said suddenly, breaking the silence, "we're receiving a transmission from the Jarnach flagship. They're demanding to know our intentions." Sora's lip curled. "Patch them through." The main screen flickered and the snarling face of Captain Thrin appeared. His yellow eyes blazed with barely contained fury, though Sora could see the uncertainty behind them. At last, a message appeared. "Human," Thrin growled, his voice a low rumble. "You dare to challenge the might of the Jarnach Collective? You bring your pitiful fleet here to die? I guarantee you won't last 1 minute. This has gone too far." Sora tilted her head slightly, her expression calm and unshakable. "Your days of dominance are over, Thrin," she said evenly. "You've underestimated humanity for the last time. Withdraw now, or face the consequences." "How many?" Cap asked. 100. Thrin's nostrils flared, and he let out a guttural laugh. "You think your ships can match ours? We have crushed your colonies, burned your worlds, and driven your people to the brink of extinction. You are insects, nothing more." Sora's smile didn't waver. "We are the insects that learned to sting," she replied coolly. "And we've grown tired of being. And for more than centuries we've gotten out of sorts with ourselves." Awesome. The bridge of the HSCS Vindicator was awash with activity, yet Admiral Sora Valen remained a calm eye in the storm. Around her, officers called out sensor readings, strategic updates, and energy signatures, but her attention was fixed on the massive holographic display. The Jarnach fleet still held its imposing formation, but now cracks had begun to show. For the first time in decades, they were afraid. "Admiral," Lieutenant Reyes called from the sensor station, voice rising with excitement and tension, "the Jarnach ships are shifting their positions again. They're attempting to consolidate into a defensive wall." Sora turned slightly, her expression as sharp as a blade. "Let them," she replied coolly. "They still don't understand what they're facing. And how could they? The Jarnach Collective had ruled this sector of space for 100 years, their might unmatched. To them, humanity had always been little more than a nuisance, scattered, desperate survivors, clutching at fading hopes. The Jarnach's war machine had marched unchallenged through human colonies, and their conquests had seemed inevitable. But now the Jarnac faced something they could not comprehend. Humanity had uncovered the Ark. Humanity had changed. The massive hologram flickered, zooming in on the enormous enemy flagship, the Voxcar. It sat at the center of the Jarnac fleet like a bloated spider, its crimson hull glowing faintly in the void. Sora could almost feel Captain Thrin's glare through the distance. "They're afraid of us," Commander Arden said quietly, stepping up beside her. He was an older officer, a veteran of humanity's darkest battles, and yet even his voice carried a note of awe. "I never thought I'd see this day." Sora allowed herself a faint smile. "Neither did they. But we're not here to bask in our victories, Commander. We're here to finish this." "No." Arden nodded, his jaw set with determination. "Understood, Admiral." You grimly watched the rest. On the Jarnac flagship Voxcar, Captain Thrin stood paralyzed before the bridge's main viewport. The human fleet, arrayed before him like a sea of stars, pulsed with power. Their ships moved with a mechanical precision that defied every expectation. It was not the humanity the Jarnac had spent centuries fighting. It was something new. The tactical hologram glowed angrily with red and blue indicators, the Jarnac fleet and the encroaching human forces. But the sensor readouts made no sense. The human ships were faster, their energy signatures were incomprehensible, and their weapons systems. Thrin had already seen enough data to know what had happened to the first wave of Jarnac skirmishers. The humans had obliterated them in seconds. "How can this be?" he snarled, his claws scraping the edge of the control panel. His officers dared not answer. They were deathly silent. The science officer finally spoke, his voice trembling. "My lord, their technology, it surpasses ours. Their energy readings are stable and infinite. We can't determine the source, but their reactors are putting out more power than should be possible." "Then determine it," Thrin roared, his voice echoing through the bridge. He turned sharply toward the viewport again, his glare burning into the advancing fleet. "This is a trick. It has to be. Humanity could not have done this alone." There is no evidence of alien intervention," the science officer replied weakly. "The ships are human, Captain. Their designs, their signatures. It's them." "Oh." Thrin's tail lashed angrily. The thought gnawed at him like a cancer. How? How had humanity, a species on the brink of extinction, managed to achieve such an impossible technological leap? Where had they found the strength to challenge the Jarnac? Then a new alert sounded, breaking through his thoughts. The communications officer turned to Thrin, her scaled face pale. "Captain, the humans are transmitting again. Their flagship is hailing us." Thrin's jaw tightened. He had no choice but to respond. "Put them through," he growled. The main screen flickered and the image of Admiral Sora Valen filled the viewport. She stood tall, her uniform immaculate, her cybernetic eye glinting in the bridge's light. Behind her, the HSCS Vindicator's bridge was a picture of calm confidence. "Captain Thrin," Sora said, her voice steady and unwavering. "Your fleet is surrounded and your position is untenable. You know this. I am giving you one chance to withdraw and return to Jarnac space. Surrender, or we will finish what you started decades ago." Thrin's claws dug deep into the console, his teeth bared in a snarl. "You dare threaten us? Us? The Jarnac Collective will burn your worlds to ash, human. You are nothing." Sora didn't blink. "We were nothing. Once. You made us strong. You taught us to fight, to survive. And now, we have surpassed you." She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a chilling calm. "Do you feel it, Captain? That fear creeping through your ranks? That's the realization that you've already lost. Thrin slammed his fist against the console, cutting the transmission abruptly. The screen went dark, but the damage had been done. A hush fell over the bridge as the crew processed the interaction. For the first time in Jarnak history, a human had spoken to them as an equal. No, as a superior. "Weapons online," Thrin growled. "Order the fleet to attack. If humanity wishes to challenge us, then we will show them why the Jarnak Collective rules the stars." "They've chosen war," Lieutenant Reyes reported from his station. "The Jarnak ships are powering weapons and advancing toward our position." Sora exhaled slowly, her face betraying no emotion. "So be it. All ships, prepare for combat." Across the fleet, orders rippled like lightning. Human ships shifted into attack formations, their engines flaring with a brilliance unseen in prior wars. The sleek dreadnoughts and cruisers took the lead, their hulls glowing faintly as their energy shields powered up. Carriers hung back, deploying swarms of fighters that darted into the void like angry hornets. "Target their flagship," Sora ordered, her voice carrying the weight of finality. "Let Captain Thrin see how far we've come." The Vindicator's forward cannons charged, energy pulsing along the massive ship's spine. The hum of the weapons filled the bridge, resonating in Sora's bones. In the silence before the first shot, she closed her eyes briefly and thought of Earth, the ruined cities, the billions lost, and the hope that had carried humanity through its darkest hours. This battle was not for vengeance, it was for survival. Fire. The Vindicator unleashed its fury. A beam of pure energy erupted from its prow, slicing through the void like a spear of light. It struck the Voxcar's shields, and for a moment, the Jarnak flagship held. But the energy surged, overwhelming the shielding systems in seconds. The shields collapsed, and the beam burned a molten path across the hull, tearing through armor and leaving devastation in its wake. All at once, the rest of the human fleet followed suit. Railguns roared, missile barrages streaked through the blackness, and energy weapons burned brightly against the dark. Jarnak ships exploded in brilliant flashes, their formations unraveling under the relentless assault. Fighters swarmed through the chaos, tearing apart enemy cruisers and frigates with deadly efficiency.